Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with the new fanfic. And if you enjoy the fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic.
What if Naruto was raised by the X-Men, returned as Wolverine's son, and every Kunoichi fell in love with him? Chapter 2. It was another wonderful, sunny day in the village of Konohagakure. While the rest of the village was absorbed in its day-to-day activities, a small brown cat was strolling through the forest on the village outskirts, a small bow tied around its neck. However, the feline was unaware that its movements were being tracked by a pair of eyes hidden behind a crimson visor. By a stroke of luck, Naruto had managed to finally locate the cat with both his enhanced sense of smell and his visor's infrared mode. From his position behind an aging tree, Naruto radioed in fine to his teammates. Sasuke-tem. Sakura-chan, target confirmed, he whispered into his comm link. What's your status, guys? I'm in the tree 20 meters south of your position, Sasuke responded. What kept you, Dobi? I'd already found this thing 3 minutes ago. I had a hard time locating it with my visor. There are a lot of cat-sized heat signatures in this forest, okay. Geez, Sakura-chan, how about you? I'm behind a bush, a yard or so away from the target, Sakura radioed back. And quit talking to Sasuke-kun like that, Naruto. It's not his fault you couldn't find it. Alright team, came Kakashi's voice on all 3 channels. You know what to do. Roger, they responded. Naruto switched his comm link off and counted down silently. 3, 2, 1. Now. At that moment, all 3 shinobi leaped from their hiding spots and tackled the unsuspecting cat. When the dust settled, Naruto was the one holding the cat, which was attempting to latch onto his face and scratch the living hell out of him. Target retrieval successful, Sasuke radioed in. Excellent job, Kakashi said. Can you confirm the target's identity? Are you sure it's Tora? Of course it's frickin' Tora. We've only caught this damn cat, 55 times? Naruto yelled over the comm link. It was at that moment that Tora decided to dig his claws into the flesh of Naruto's forearm. Yeow! Someone get this stupid cat off me. 15 minutes later, Team 7 reassembled in Sarutobi's office in Hokage Tower, where the fire daimyo's wife was picking up Tora. Kakashi, Sasuke, and Sakura stood silently as they waited to receive their next assignment, while Naruto sat cross-legged on the floor, drumming his fingers against one knee in boredom. He'd had it with all these D-rank assignments. This was about the 75th time they'd been given a low-ranking mission, and as always, it was to do a menial chore that kids in America usually did on a day-to-day basis. This is so aggravating, he thought to himself with a yawn. It's been so long since I've had some excitement. I'm starting to wonder if I'll ever see action again. Well, Kit, said Kyuubi. Not every ninja mission is gonna have excitement or fighting. You've just got to take what they give ya, until you make Chunin or Junin, that is. Yeah, I know, but seriously, even schoolwork back at the institute wasn't as boring as this is. I'm about to go crazy, it's so boring. Alright, said Sarutobi, abruptly snapping Naruto's thoughts back to reality. Let's see what we've got for your next mission. He then went over a long list of tasks that were all D-rank assignments, much to Naruto's dismay. The blonde groaned audibly, which was enough to catch Sarutobi's attention. Is something the matter, Naruto? Uh-oh, thought Kakashi with a sigh. I was afraid he was going to do this at one point or another. What are doing, Dobi? Thought Sasuke, narrowing his eyes at the blonde. Yeah, I guess you could say that, the young X-man said, responding to Sarutobi's question. It's just that, all you've given us so far are these boring D-rank missions. I wish you'd give us something that's a bit more challenging, for a change. I mean, you could pay the kid down the street to do crap like this. It's so monotonous. Just as Iruka, who sat next to the Hokage, was about to berate Naruto for his somewhat arrogant tone, Sarutobi silenced him with a wave of his hand. "All right then, Naruto," he said calmly. "From what you've shown on your past assignments, you and your team have proven time and again that you have the capacity to handle a tougher mission." Sarutobi then looked over a C-rank assignment that he'd recently received. "This will be your first C-rank mission. You will be escorting a bridge builder by the name of Tazuna to the Land of Waves, after which you will stay and protect him and his workers from any trouble that may come their way until the time their current project is completed." The Sandaime Hokage then nodded at a pair of chunin that stood by the office sliding doors, and they let in a slightly drunken man with graying hair and round-rimmed glasses. He held a sake bottle in one hand. "So, this is the team that's gonna be protecting me, he questioned with a bit of a chuckle. "No offense, but they all look pretty pathetic, especially the one with the whiskers and the fiery-looking hair." Naruto's hair still had red dyed into the spikes. "Ah well, I got a bridge that needs buildin', so let's go." "Actually, Tazuna-san," said Kakashi, "I think it'd be best if we left in the morning. We'll be better prepared for the journey that way," he mentally added. "Plus you'll be sober then too, making it a lot less difficult for us to protect you." Whatever you say," was the man's reply. The man then departed for the nearest inn to reserve a room for the night, leaving Team 7 to prep for their journey. As he left Hokage Tower, Naruto could barely contain his enthusiasm. This would be his first time outside Konohagakure. Finally, something exciting, and there's no better way to celebrate a new mission than at Ichiraku Ramen, he thought to himself as he headed for his favorite restaurant. Nearing the shop, the wondrous scent of freshly cooked ramen wafting through the air flooded his senses. Pushing aside the curtains, Naruto was surprised to see Kiba, Akamaru, Hinata, and Shino seated at the counter. Akamaru barked a greeting as he entered, which alerted the others to his presence. "Yo Naruto, what's up?" said Kiba cheerfully, patting his friend on the back as he sat down next to them. "Not much, Kiba," he replied. "Oye-sama finally gave us a mission that isn't a D rank." "Sweet. Whatcha gonna be doin'?" As Naruto began to explain what had transpired at Hokage Tower a few moments ago, Hinata sat silently next to Kiba, staring longingly at her crush. Ever since the academy, she'd had feelings for Naruto, and although they'd become good friends, she still felt butterflies in her stomach whenever they were together. Why is it so difficult just to talk to him? She wondered as she watched him eat his order of miso ramen. How come I can never find the words to stay when we're together? Suddenly, she felt a slight twinge of pain flare up in her head. She'd been having headaches for a few weeks now, but each one seemed to grow more intense than the previous. Naruto noticed Hinata wince in pain and put her hand to her temple. Something was wrong. She'd done that yesterday when he dropped off a package from Sandaime at the Hyuga compound. "Hey, Hinata," he began, "are you feeling all right?" Why yes, Naruto-kun," she replied, pretending nothing was wrong. It's just a headache is all. Nothing to worry about. Maybe you should get some rest anyhow, just to be safe," Naruto suggested, raising an eyebrow skeptically. I guess you're right," she agreed remorsefully. She'd really wanted to stay and talk with him some more, but he was probably right. Kiba, Shino, and Akamaru elected to walk her home, seeing as they lived in that direction anyhow. Naruto said goodbye and told Hinata to get well soon, which caused her to blush noticeably. After they'd left, he turned back to his meal. He thought as he ate another bite of miso ramen. I wonder what's up with Hinata. It's probably none of my business, but it wouldn't hurt to keep an eye on her. Just as Naruto reached to take a sip of the tea that Ayame had set out for him, he heard a slight TNK sound. Looking down, he noticed that his glass had suddenly developed a minuscule, hairline crack in it, one that seemed to spider out to all dimensions of the cup. Now that's odd, he thought. Wasn't a superstitious person, yet something in his gut told him that this new mission of his wasn't something he should take lightly. After he'd finished his meal and paid, Naruto trudged back home to pack for the trip and get a good night's rest. He knew that he'd have to be prepared for whatever tomorrow would hold. The following morning, Naruto awoke bright and early to double-check his provisions he'd packed the previous night after donning his cyber visor and civilian attire. Everything seemed to be in place, from the first cup of instant ramen, right down to the last round of signal flares. His bizarre premonition last night had put him somewhat on edge, but he'd remembered that he made his own luck, not the other way around. Still, it didn't hurt to be cautious, especially when on an escort mission. Seeing as he was already up and ready, he headed out for the village gates and, once there, set his backpack down on a rock and proceeded to wait for the rest of his team. A slight mist hung over the village that morning, making it a bit difficult to see at first, but after a while, Naruto's eyes adjusted. Half an hour later, Sasuke showed up wearing his usual disinterested scowl, Sakura trailing faithfully behind her crush. He greeted them warmly, only to receive the usual hump from the Uchiha. I still have no idea what she sees in him, Naruto thought as he flash-cooked a cup of ramen with his plasma claws, then set about devouring it. An hour later, after he'd finished his ramen and cycled through his iPod's collection of Diana Krall songs at least once, Kakashi finally showed up with Tazuna in tow. Well, it looks as though you three are all set, the copy nin surmised. Time to head out. All right, Naruto exclaimed in excitement, punching the air. Let's roll. Hey, Tazuna said, pointing at Naruto, will a kid like this really be capable of handling a mission like this? Now that got Naruto annoyed. Who was this old geezer to question his competence for a mission? He'd been on more possible A-rank missions with the X-Men than he could count on his fingers and toes. Hey, he said sharply, staring at Tazuna with an annoyed expression. Don't ever underestimate me, you got that? You're looking at an elite shinobi who's gone on more missions abroad than you'd even think, and the future Hokage. The name's Uzumaki howled at Naruto, remember it. Naruto, Sakura thought silently, a vein throbbing on her forehead. Idiot, Sasuke glowered. Yeah right, replied Tazuna, taking a swig of sake. There's no way a kid like you'd ever become Hokage. Grr, whatever, ya old geezer. Think what you want, but I will become Hokage, you can count on that for sure. Deciding that further arguing would have been pointless, Naruto dropped the subject for now, and the group continued onward towards their destination. However, none of them noticed the two pairs of eyes that followed them from the trees wherever they went. Several hours later, the group came up to a bridge that spanned a small river. Upon crossing the bridge, they continued down the path towards the shore, where Tazuna had said a boat was waiting to ferry them over to the wave country. They hadn't gone a mile from the bridge when Naruto stopped suddenly. Looking to either side, he sniffed the air warily. Something's scent had caught his nose a second ago, but what it was he couldn't tell. Hey, Dobi, what's the hold up? Called Sasuke over his shoulder as the group continued on ahead. It's nothin', Naruto said, checking over his shoulder as he caught up with them. It was then that he noticed a puddle on the side of the road. He'd been standing a few meters from it when Sasuke called out to him. That's weird, he thought, taking a moment to observe his surroundings. From the looks of the area, it hasn't rained here in a while. The road's way too dusty too. Something ain't right here. Suddenly, as if to confirm his suspicions, a cloaked figure rose menacingly out of the puddle. He wore a camouflage outfit, a tattered black cloak, a clawed gauntlet on his right hand, and a respirator that covered most of his face. The Hittite on his head had a pair of horns sprouting from the metal. In one fluid motion, the assassin whipped out a blade-covered chain, which was attached to his gauntlet, and flung it at them with all his might. There was a second assassin linked to the opposite end of the chain. The instant he landed in front of them, he flicked out with his end of the chain and lassoed it around Kakashi, restraining him completely. With a single jerk from either end, the pair shredded Kakashi into 1,000 pieces, which rained to the ground in a sickening thud. "Kakashi-sensei!" shrieked Sakura in horror. The second that she screamed, Naruto was already on the offensive, shedding his backpack as he went to increase his speed. Maizu, the second, younger assassin, noticed the blonde charging at them and swung his end of the blade chain at him. Naruto swiftly ducked under the blade and rose up to attack, plasma claws scything through the air. "Eat plasma, Camo Freak!" Naruto shouted. In one swift, upward stroke, he sliced clean through Maizu's respirator and carved a set of 5 smoking lines into his face. With his respirator gone, Maizu's mouth was clearly visible as he uttered an inhuman cry of pain, groping at his ruined face with his free arm. Naruto grinned in satisfaction and moved to add insult to injury, when suddenly a jolt of incredible pain traveled through his entire body, forcing to his knees. He glanced down at his left arm to see a series of hairline cuts running along his left arm, each oozing with some translucent liquid. Damn, the chain's razor blades were poisoned. He thought, "I can feel it startin' to spread through my body." "Don't worry about it, Kit," Kyuubi reassured him. "My healing factor will clear it up in a sec, just hang tough." "Easy for you to say. You don't have 2 incredibly pissed off mercenaries breathing down your neck at the moment." "Die, ya little brat," roared Maizu, clutching his ruined face as he swung his chain. Gozo, coming to the aid of his injured brother, flicked out his length of the chain as well. It was at that moment that Sasuke sprang into action, literally. He leapt to one side and flung a shuriken at an open link in the chains. All his shuriken jutsu training as a kid paid off as the throwing star found its mark, fastening the chains securely to a nearby tree trunk. A well-placed kunai knife ensured its stability a second later. "Damn," Gozo swore, struggling to free his arm. "It won't budge." Sasuke grinned in satisfaction and flickered away, only to reappear standing atop both assassins' trapped arms. In one swift motion, the Uchiha dropped to grab onto the brothers' gloves and lashed out with both feet simultaneously, nailing both of them in the Adam's apple. The 2 assassins staggered back, stunned from the blow. Upon quickly recovering, their chains discharged from the gauntlets, freeing them up to launch a 2-pronged attack on Tazuna. Naruto attempted to stand and stop them, but he was in no condition to fight until Kyuubi's healing factor had done its job. Suddenly, a blur of motion caught his eye. A moment later, he saw Sasuke reappear in front of Tazuna and Sakura, arms out at either side to protect them. Just as Maizu was about to gut him, Kakashi suddenly appeared out of thin air, Gozo hanging limply under his left arm, and clotheslined the young assassin. Within seconds, he'd wrapped his arm around the younger brother's windpipe and twisted, snapping his neck like a toothpick. Crack! Maizu's body maintained its hang time for a moment, and then slumped lifelessly in the Junin's grasp, dead as a doornail. "Kakashi-sensei!" Sakura exclaimed in relief at seeing their sensei alive. "Hey gang, sorry to scare you for a second there," grinned the copy nin sheepishly. "Damn, he's fast," Naruto though as he looked over to where they'd seen Kakashi perish. A pile of hacked-up lumber had taken the place of their sensei's supposed remains. He'd already performed Kawarimi in half the time we'd taken to blink. I doubt even Quicksilver could have reacted that fast. "Good job you guys," Kakashi approved as he set the 2 assassins down underneath the nearby tree. "Sakura, you did good, protecting Tazuna like that. Sasuke, Naruto, you both handled the situation smoothly." "Thanks Kakashi-sensei," Naruto replied, shakily rising to his feet. You're in the green, Kit, Kyuubi said, having finished healing him. There's still some poison around the wound's opening, but it's nothing you can't cauterize with your claws. Swell, Naruto returned, before glancing sideways at Sasuke. Man, why'd he have to show me up like that? I didn't need his help. Well, now that the crisis at hand is over, you've got a lot of explaining to do, Chizuna-san, said Kakashi, turning to face the bridge builder. These jokers who attacked us were Chunin from Kurigakure, who specialized in berserker-like assaults. When you hired us, you asked for standard protection against highwaymen and bandits. You never said that there were ninja looking for you, hunting you down. If we knew this, it would have been a B rank mission or higher, and we would have staffed and charged accordingly. We were only supposed to protect you until your bridge was finished, not field attacks from enemy ninja. Apparently, you have your reasons for lying to us, but it is still unacceptable. We are far beyond the scope of our mission at this point. Kakashi-sensei, this is way too advanced for us as genin, Sakura reasoned. We should go back to the village and get Naruto's hand checked out. Don't worry about me, Sakura-chan, Naruto told her. He materialized his plasma claws on his right hand and swiftly pushed them into the spot where he'd first been cut. The intense energy burned into the wound, both cauterizing it and neutralizing the remaining poison. It hurt like hell, but Naruto fought back his urge to roar in pain, knowing that he'd dealt with worse in the past. Upon this wound, he proclaimed, I vow never to be a burden to the mission from here on out. And I'll never have to be saved by Sasuke Tem ever again, believe it. Naruto, what are you doing? Sakura exclaimed. It's okay, he reassured her. My healing factor already took care of the poison. I'm just sealing the wound so it won't get infected. Sakura was silent for a moment, and then nodded in approval. Naruto then took a length of gauze from his pack and began to wrap up his hand. Chizuna-san, he said, having finished bandaging his hand, you may have lied to us, but I aim to finish this mission, no matter what. It takes a lot more than a couple of clowns in camo PJs to scare me off. The rest of the group regarded Naruto with silent awe in that moment. He'd just come inches from death, yet he still chose to continue. Thought Kakashi. He mentioned a healing factor, yet so far all we've seen of his mutation are his plasma claws. Could his healing powers be a result of his unity with the Kyuubi? Deciding it would be best to save this thought until another time, the copy nin sighed and turned to face Sakura and Sasuke. Well, Naruto notwithstanding, what do you two think? I'm with the Dobi on this one, Sasuke replied calmly, much to everyone's surprise. If the enemies we'll have to face later on are anything like these weaklings, we can beat them easily. And what about you, Sakura? Well, the pink-haired Kunoichi paused for a moment. Naruto seems to be okay, and if you and Sasuke think we can handle it. Alright, I guess it's settled. We'll continue the mission as planned. With that, Kakashi hid the bodies of the demon brothers, Naruto retrieved his backpack, and the group resumed their trek towards the coast. Just as Chizuna made to follow them, he felt Kakashi's hand on his shoulder. Don't think you're off the hook just yet, the Junin whispered. We'll talk about your deception later. After that, Chizuna didn't hear a word from Kakashi the rest of the journey. Later that night, when they had made it to their designated campsite near the beach, Kakashi decided to ask Naruto a question about his days with the X-Men. So, Naruto, he began, Sandaime-sama tells me that you were made a member of the X-Men's field team when you were 11. Care to share what life with the X-Men is like? Well, it's a lot different from the academy in the village, I can tell you that much, replied Naruto in between bites of instant ramen. The institute's main building is like any typical American prep school. The classes are mainly the same too: English, math, science, history, drama, PE and some other classes that are a lot different. Then there's the sub-basement. That's where the students who want to become X-Men train in the danger room and stuff like that. But our missions are probably a lot different from what ninja do. How so? Asked Sakura, gaining interest as the blonde spoke. Naruto smiled, thinking back to some of the missions he'd been a part of with the X-Men. I can tell you guys, they're a blast. I've been on a lot of really diverse missions in the past, ranging from VIP protection and peacekeeping, to hostage rescues and all-out battles in the most unlikely of places. Usually I got assigned to stuff like crowd control or search and rescues, but then there were times when I got to be right in the middle of the action, duking it out with some of the worst villains in the world. Heck, I even got to work with S.H.I.E.L.D. from time to time. Now granted, Dad wanted me to be safe and not do anything stupid, but that never really happened. But it wasn't always easy, I can tell you that. Sometimes it felt as though I was gonna collapse after certain missions. At this, Team 7 couldn't help but look at him in awe. Even Kakashi and Sasuke were impressed. So basically, Kakashi said, jerking his thumb at Sasuke and Sakura, while these two were learning the basics of chakra and hand seals, you were being assigned to missions that we'd have reserved for Chunin and Junin. I guess so, the blonde shrugged nonchalantly, taking another bite of ramen. Wow, Sakura marveled. Well, that's interesting, mused Sasuke as he digested what Naruto had told him, along with his food. He had considered asking him more, but he decided against it. Just as he was about to take another bite of his meal, his eyes began to itch again. Arg, damn it, why does this keep happening? He thought as he rubbed at his eyes furiously. Ever since the bell test, Sasuke'd been experiencing frequent headaches, along with a bizarre irritation in the backs of his eyes. At first he thought it was just his Sharingan developing, but the symptoms had begun to appear on a regular basis. Hey, Sasuke-kun, are you okay? Sakura asked him, a hint of concern in her voice. I'm fine, Sakura-chan, he replied, annoyed at his vulnerability. My eyes just itches all. Naruto, who was seated to Sakura's right, had also noticed Sasuke's irritation. He'd seen Sasuke rub at his eyes like that a few days ago, but this time was different somehow, more intense. He thought, poking at a glowing ember with his claws. First Hinata's headaches and now Sasuke's itchy eyes. What could be going on here? Oh, I almost forgot. Sakura exclaimed, a look of realization on her face as she bent to rummage through her backpack for something. Her expression changed to one of satisfaction as she produced a small bottle, complete with a dropper attachment at the top. I picked up these eye drops for you last night, Sasuke-kun. I hope they help with the itching. Sasuke didn't know how to react at first, but after a moment, he took the bottle from her and carefully applied a drop of the solution to each of his eyes. After a couple of blinks, he noticed that the itching had all but stopped completely. In a few minutes, it would probably even be gone. Sasuke turned and looked at Sakura with an intrigued look. Up until now, he'd only seen her as just another fangirl, but now she seemed different. She seemed to genuinely care about him, instead of just chase after him haphazardly like the others, simply because he was popular. Arigato, Sakura-chan, he said finally, pocketing the eye drops. Kakashi watched all of this unfold from his seat on the log parallel to the kids with a feeling of nostalgia tugging at the back of his mind. Seeing the way that Sakura and Sasuke acted together reminded him of the old days, of the friends he'd made so long ago. Especially a certain pair that would always remain a part of him. It's like looking into a mirror, thought the silver-haired Junin, chuckling mentally as Sasuke resumed his tense composure. Well, almost. He shifted his gaze upwards, watching the fire's smoke as it drifted lazily into the endless sky of stars above them. I still can't tell what the future holds, even with this eye. But I guess that's one of life's greatest mysteries, not knowing. Obito. The next morning, the group awoke early and set out for a small alcove near the far side of the beach. There they met a friend of Tezuna's who had offered to take them back over to the land of waves in his boat. A thick fog had rolled in that morning, making it nearly impossible for the group to see for about 10 feet in front of them. For about 2/4 of the trip they used the craft's outboard motor, and then shut it off halfway and switched to using a conventional wooden oar. After an hour and a half of such travel, they were finally able to see the bridge. Even though it was far from finished, it was still very impressive. When Sakura asked why they were being so sneaky, Kakashi turned to Tezuna. "All right, Tezuna-san," he said firmly. "Why did you deceive us back there? You must have had a good reason. Either you tell us now, or I'll personally see to it that this mission ends once we reach the land of waves." Tezuna was silent for a moment, then he adjusted his glasses along the bridge of his nose and sighed. "I have no choice but to tell you. No, I want you to know the truth. It's just as you said, this is beyond the scope of the original mission. The one who seeks my life is a very short man, who casts a very long and deadly shadow. I'm sure you've heard his name before, the shipping magnate, Getu." "Getu," Kakashi interjected. "Of Getu Transport Inc. He's a well-known and respected businessman." "Yes, that's all true indeed," Tezuna continued. "But, below the surface of his corporation, with the same ruthlessness he uses in his business practices, he runs an underworld crime ring that deals in drug trafficking and illegal contraband. He's known to employ both ninja and yakuza to take care of any wet work he needs done. Exactly 1 year ago, when he first laid his eyes on the land of waves, he used his vast wealth to usurp total control of our transport and shipping. Anyone who opposed him or stood in his way simply disappeared. In an island nation such as our own, whoever controls the sea controls everything. But there is one thing that Getu truly fears, and that is the bridge. Once it is completed, it will join us to the mainland and finally break his control over us." "So that's it," Sakura said after he'd finished. "Since you're this bridge's architect and oversee its construction, you're this guy's only real threat to controlling this island. That means that those 2 jokers we fought yesterday were hired by Getu as well," Sasuke surmised grimly. "So if you knew how dangerous this was, why didn't you tell us this back when you first asked for the mission?" Kakashi asked sternly. "Because the land of waves is a small and impoverished nation," Tezuna said sadly. "Heck, even our nobles have little money. The common people, who are building this bridge, can't pay for an A or B rank mission, as it is far too expensive." "Grr," Naruto growled in his mind, grinding his teeth angrily. He'd been listening to Tezuna's story while perched near the bow of the boat, all of his senses open and scanning for any threats as they went. However, the more he heard about Getu's cruelty and the plight of the land of waves, the angrier he became. "It's people like this Getu guy and the Kingpin that really make me wanna forget Xavier Oye-sama's lectures on human-mutant equality. This jerk is willing to oppress innocent people, just so he can get richer. If I ever run into this guy." Shaking off his rage, Naruto tapped Kakashi on the shoulder. "Kakashi-sensei, even if Tezuna-san deceived us to get this mission, I really think we should go ahead with the original mission," he said adamantly. "If we've gotten this far, we should at least see this through to the end. That, and I can't stand to sit by and let this Getu guy run roughshod over these people like this. It's just not right." "Yes, Naruto, it's not right," agreed Kakashi calmly. "And while I agree with your suggestion, keep in mind what our mission is here, as well as how severe it may become. Our next opponents won't be Chunin, like those 2 from yesterday, they'll most likely be Junin, highly skilled and trained to kill at the drop of a hat." "Understood." Naruto nodded in compliance. "Yes, Kakashi-sensei. I understand completely. 15 minutes later, their boat neared the end of the bridge and entered a long and dark tunnel. Once inside, Naruto ignited his plasma claws, in order to help their guide better navigate the catacombs. Soon they reached the exit and were greeted with a beautiful blue sky, in sharp contrast to the gloomy mist on the opposite end of the tunnel. After they had landed at one of the nearby docks, they thanked their guide and set out for Tezuna's house, which was located clear on the other side of a dense forest. As they walked through the quiet forest, Naruto kept his senses wide open, sniffing the air every once in a while. 10 minutes later, as the group neared a small lake, he caught a human scent off to his right and held up his hand, signaling everyone else to halt. A gleaming, serrated hunting dagger popped out from a hidden compartment in his jacket's sleeve. With a flick of his wrist, he sent it flying into the brush, a satisfying thunk. Following a fraction of a second later, suddenly, Naruto's ears picked up the sound of air being displaced, like a vacuum. At the same time, he noticed that the human scent he'd smelled a second earlier had been replaced with that of an animal. Walking over to the spot where his dagger had landed and parting the bushes, Naruto was greeted by the sight of a frightened, trembling Baka. Sakura yelled as she ran over and forcefully shoved him aside. You acted up over a bunny rabbit of all things. She bent down and picked up the shaking rabbit, rocking it back and forth as she cradled it in her arms to calm it down. Luckily for both Naruto and the rabbit, the knife had embedded itself in a tree, just inches above the poor creature's head. Quit tryin' to freak me out, ya damn kid. Tezuna swore, sweat running down his neck like a river. Dobi, thought Sasuke, remind me why he's a member of the X-Men for Kami's sake. Naruto thought, rolling his eyes. He retrieved his dagger and returned it to his sheath. He was about to stand up when the rabbit caught his eye again. Its coat was pure white. Hold up, that's a snow rabbit from the north, like the ones up in Alaska. Their coats only turn white in the winter months, when the days are shorter and there's less light out. So why is this thing white when? Just then, he noticed Kakashi staring at the rabbit as well. It was in that moment that it clicked. Someone had raised this rabbit indoors and away from the light so that it could be used for a kawarimi. So, they're already here, he thought, scanning the area. All of a sudden, a dense, ominous blanket of mist rolled into the area. Naruto began reflexively curling and uncurling his hands, wanting to bring his plasma claws to bear, but holding off until the real enemy was in sight. Suddenly, a huge sword came flying at them from out of the trees. Hit the dirt, he yelled as he ducked to avoid the massive, bladed projectile. The rest of group followed suit and leapt out of the sword's path. It passed harmlessly over their heads and embedded itself into the trunk of a nearby tree. After a moment of silence, the blade's apparent owner flickered into existence, standing on its cumbersome hilt with his back to them. He was a dark, foreboding figure, garbed in a pair of purple, pinstripe slacks, cow-print cloth braces and leg warmers, and standard shinobi sandals. His mouth was bandaged from the bridge of his nose all the way down to his shoulders, a Kurigakur no Sato Hitai tied around his forehead. It was then that Naruto recognized him. He'd seen his photo in the Konohagakure bingo book when he'd downloaded the digital version into Cerebra's files. Only Nuke Nin from the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist wielded a Kubikiri Hako, decapitating knife, of that size. Well, preened Zabuza Momochi, demon of the mist, from his perch atop his blade. What do we have here? Now, ain't this a surprise? Laughed Zabuza Momochi as he stared down at Team 7 and Tezuna from atop his sword. Naruto clenched his fists anxiously as the Nuke Nin spoke. Behind his bandages, his voice was gruff and evil, almost like that of Sabretooth. Who'd have thought I'd find you here, Hitaki Kakashi? Or should I call you by your alias, Kakashi of the Sharingan Eye? Did I get that right? What, the Sharingan? thought Sasuke in surprise. He whipped his head around to stare at Kakashi intently. How could he? HMPH, responded Kakashi nonchalantly. And, you must be Momochi Zabuza, the demon of the hidden mist. S-Class Nuke Nin. Graduated from the Kurigakure no Sato Shinobi Academy by slaying his entire class, despite his lack of ninja training. Ex-member of the Seven Swordsmen of the Blood, Mist and leader of Kurigakure's assassination squad before being exiled following his failed coup against the Mizukage. Hey, impressive, replied Zabuza. This is not good, Naruto thought, a sudden feeling of unease washing over him. All right, enough small talk, Kakashi, the Nuke Nin growled, kneeling down to clasp the hilt of his blade. Let's not make this any bloodier than it needs to be. Hand over the old man and I'll spare you and your pathetic excuse for a team. Now, you know that I can't do that, Zabuza, Kakashi rebutted dryly as he slowly lifted his Hitai-Ite, revealing his left eye, which was shut in intense concentration like his right. After a moment, which seemed like an eternity, he opened his eyes, revealing a red pupil in his left, its iris hemmed with 3 separate tones. Everyone, he said to the group over his shoulder, Manji battle formation. Protect Tazuna, and don't interfere. All 3 of them nodded in acknowledgement and got into position around Tazuna. Naruto to his left, ready to ignite his plasma claws, Sakura to his right, a kunai at the ready, and Sasuke out in front, his hand shadowing his ninja holster. How does Kakashi have the Sharingan? Sasuke thought, still staring at Kakashi's left eye in astonishment. Sharingan is a rare trait that only manifests itself in a few members of the Uchiha clan, my clan. Hey, looks like I get to see the Sharingan in action, Zabuza said bluntly, a grin barely visible beneath his bandages. This is an honor. I have the pleasure of being the one who slew the man who copied 1,000 jutsu. Kakashi, the copy ninja. With that, Zabuza grabbed hold of his sword and kicked off of the tree, ripping the blade free in the process. To the amazement of Naruto and his friends, he landed on the top of the water and stood there, one hand at mouth level and the other raised above his head, both forming an ninjutsu seal. Tiny droplets of water swirled around him like a small hurricane. He's building up a huge amount of chakra, Kakashi observed silently, and channeling it into the water. This could be trouble. Ninku. Kirigakure no Jutsu, ninja art. Hidden mist jutsu, said Zabuza menacingly. In a matter of seconds, the mist that blanketed the area became thicker than it was before, causing Zabuza to vanish without a trace. This is not good, Kakashi said as the mist enveloped them. Zabuza is a master of the silent kill, a deadly technique that takes place without warning. He looked over his shoulder at his team. Don't let your guard down, not even for a second. If you do, you'll be dead before you know it. Naruto nodded, dropped into a low-hung gar serpent stance and unsheathed his plasma claws, his right arm out in front of him, parallel with his right leg while his left hand guarded his face. His eyes flicked back and forth from his teammates, to the foreboding mist that surrounded them. The silence in and of itself had become overwhelming. So much bloodlust, he thought as he scanned the mist warily, his heart pounding away in his chest like a jackhammer. It's almost as powerful as Sabretooth's. I've fought cyborgs, alien invaders, mutant hunting sentinels, and psychotic super criminals. So, why is it that this one guy's so terrifying? 8 points, came Zabuza's voice from somewhere in the mist, causing the hackles on the back of Naruto's neck to stand on end. Larynx, spinal column, lungs, liver. Where is that coming from? Sakura wondered aloud, terror growing in her voice. It's like we're fighting the mist itself. He could be anywhere. Jugular, subclavian artery, kidneys, heart, the Nuke Nin finished. So many choices. Which vital, vulnerable spot shall I choose? Heh, 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 heh. This is crazy, thought Sasuke in a panic, sweat beating down his neck, his eyes shifting warily from right to left. It feels as though one small breath, one twitch of the eye, and it'll all be over. If it goes on like this, I'll go insane. In his mind's eye, Sasuke had a chilling image of himself being decapitated mid-blink. It was so frighteningly realistic he had to force himself to push the vision out of his head and focus on front of him. Kakashi had triggered a massive release of his own chakra, so intense that Sasuke could actually feel it bearing down on him. The clash of two Junin, both intent on killing one another. I've never felt anything so chilling. Not since that night. That thought prompted another vision, only this wasn't a figment of his imagination, but a memory long since repressed. An avenue littered with bodies and horrendous gore, blood trickling steadily through the crevices in the pavement. A dark figure crouched atop a telephone pole silhouetted by the moon, its eyes burning a hellish shade of red, the unearthly silence of the night seeping into the marrow of his bones. No, Sasuke cried out in his mind. He pulled a kunai free from his ningu holster and raised it over his abdomen. I can't take this, I'd rather. Sasuke. Kakashi barked, startling him. Calm down. I'll protect all of you with my life. I will not allow my comrades to die, trust me on that. Somehow, his words did calm Sasuke, reassuring him of their safety. I wouldn't be so sure about that, retorted Zabuza smugly. Suddenly, he materialized in the center of the group's formation, sword at the ready. It's over. Without warning, Naruto's instincts took over and he shifted his stance, whirling around to slash at Zabuza with a powerful right stroke. His attack caught Zabuza by surprise, forcing him to hastily block Naruto's claws with his sword. The energy blades left 5 smoking marks that gored along the width of the Kubikiri Hako. What the hell are those things? Zabuza wondered as he backpedaled to avoid another attack. Seeing the opening Naruto had inadvertently given him, Kakashi rushed Nuke Nin and plunged a kunai into his side. Much to his surprise, it wasn't blood that flowed from the wound, but water. A fraction of a second later, Zabuza collapsed into a puddle of water at his feet. Before Kakashi could react, another Zabuza appeared behind him and swung his sword with all his might, effectively cleaving the copy nin in two. However, it was his turn to be surprised, as the Kakashi he struck burst into a spray of water as well. It can't be, thought Zabuza. Even through the mist, he saw through my jutsu and copied it in an instant. Don't move, threatened Kakashi's voice from behind him. Zabuza flinched at the sound and felt something sharp press against his throat. A razor-edged kunai, held by none other than Kakashi himself. Now it's over. Heh, 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 Zabuza chuckled darkly. Finished. You really have no idea. Your technique is but a mere crass imitation. I'll never be defeated by a mere copycat ninja like you. You're full of surprises though, I'll give you that. You'd already copied my Mizubushin no Jutsu, water clone jutsu, when you made your little speech, hiding in the mist to analyze my technique. Nice try, but I'm not that easy to fool, said the true Zabuza from behind him. Kakashi barely had time to react as the Nuke Nin swung his massive blade, his clone popping into a spray of water at the same moment. He ducked under the blade, which caused it to miss him, its momentum forcing it into the ground. Kakashi rose to attempt an attack again, only to be met with a solid and powerful kick that sent him flying off into the lake. Zabuza took hold of his sword and ran to intercept Kakashi mid-flight, wrenching it out of the ground in the process. He was halfway to the lake when he spotted a number of caltrops scattered around in front of him and skirted around them. Makabishi spikes. Trying to slow me down, Foolish. Kakashi-sensei. Naruto yelled as their sensei hit the water. Crap, not only is this guy an expert assassin, but his strength is insane too. I can't believe Kakashi-sensei got kicked through the air like that, thought Sakura, fright taking a stronger hold in her mind. Gah, gasped Kakashi as he resurfaced from beneath the water. However, something wasn't right. This isn't normal water, he observed. It's dense, heavy. That's the idea, fool, Zabuza mocked as he flickered into view behind Kakashi, weaving hand seals at incredible speeds. Suoro no Jutsu, Water Prison Jutsu. Immediately, the water around Kakashi surged upward on either side of him, joining together over his head to form a bubble-like prison. Okay, reflected Kakashi. Escaping to the water, big mistake. This prison is made of water, but it's as strong as steel, explained Zabuza haughtily. Hard to fight when you can't move, isn't it? So much of the great Kakashi Hatake. I'll finish you off later, but your little friends have to be eliminated. The Nuke Nin made one-handed ram seal, and a new Mizu Bushin materialized from the water, striding towards Team 7 and Tazuna with a murderous look in its eyes. You think that wearing a Hitai-Ite makes you a ninja? The clone said. When you've hovered between life and death so many times that it ceases to faze you, then you may be called a ninja. When you've become so deadly that your profile is listed in my bingo book, then you may have earned the title, ninja. But, to call upstarts like you ninja is a joke. Before their very eyes, the clone vanished into the mist. Then, in an instant, it reappeared in front of Naruto and delivered a powerful kick to his head that sent him flying backwards, knocking his Hitai-Ite clean off in the process. You're just brats, the clone hissed, stepping on the headband as it did. Everyone, Kakashi yelled at his team, his voice slightly distorted from behind the wall of water, take Tazuna and run. He's using all of his power to keep me in this prison, so he can only engage you with his Mizu Bushin, but it can't stray far from its real body. If you leave here, he can't follow you, now run. Run away. No, mused Sasuke, trying to overcome his growing sense of paranoia, that became unthinkable the moment you got caught. It doesn't matter how far we go, he'll wipe us out. In the end, if we're on our own we're done for. Our only chance of survival is to rescue you. Acting on sheer impulse, Sasuke ran at the clone head-on, cutting loose with a volley of shuriken as he went. The Zabuza Bushin whipped out its sword and easily deflected the shuriken as though they were nothing but a swarm of gnats. It was then that it noticed a chakra signature directly above it and looked up just in time to see Sasuke bearing down on it, a kunai poised high over his head. The blow never connected however, as the clone lashed out with its right hand and had Sasuke by the throat in the time it took him to blink. Hey, pathetic, the Bushin sneered arrogantly. With that, he effortlessly tossed Sasuke aside like a sack of flour, sending him crashing into the ground in front of Team 7 and Tazuna. Sasuke-kun, no, screamed Sakura in horror, rushing to her crush's side. By this time, Naruto had managed to shake off the effects of the Bushin's kick and sat up in time to see Sasuke get sent flying. That idiot, he thought. What was he thinking? There's no way we can take him one-on-one like that. We've got to arg. A sudden wave of pain shot through his left arm as he tried to push himself to his feet. He looked down at his bandaged hand, the gauze serving as a reminder of his oath that he'd made yesterday. That's right, I made a promise. And if we want to get through this guy, we've got to quit acting like a bunch of kids, and start thinking like a team instead. First things first though, all of a sudden, Naruto charged the Mizu Bushin with incredible speed, bellowing in rage as he went. Ah, Naruto, what the heck are you doing? Yelled Sakura in disbelief, pulling at her hair in response to the tension. Beside her, Sasuke looked on in confusion. Just what was Naruto going? What, Naruto? No, warned Kakashi from his position inside the water prison. Hey, little fool, scoffed the clone haughtily. As soon as the young X-man reached him, Zabuza sent him flying backwards with another, crippling kick. He flew for several feet, before landing and skidding to a stop directly in front of Sakura. What are you think charging at him by yourself, Baka? She asked as she knelt down to his level. We're only genin. We don't have a chance against a Junin, and even Sasuke couldn't touch him. What did you think you'd accomplish by that? At that moment, Naruto slowly began to stand, wincing in obvious pain. It was then that Sakura noticed something in his left hand that wasn't there a second ago, his Hite that Zabuza had knocked off. The headband, she thought, a bit perplexed. That's what he wanted. Hey you, said Naruto, cracking his neck audibly as he got to his feet, the freak with no eyebrows. Put this in your damn bingo book, bub. The shinobi who will become Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato, he never backs down. Naruto emphasized this by cinching on his Hite tightly. His name's Naruto Uzumaki Howlett and he's the best at what he does. Hey, and I thought he was all talk, Tazuna observed from his position behind Sakura and Sasuke. This kid's got some guts after all. All right Sasuke, listen up, said Naruto, flicking out his plasma claws as he spoke. I've got a plan for how we can beat this guy. Oh, now he's got a plan, thought the Uchiha sarcastically. Okay, let's hear it. Out on the surface of the lake, Zabuza watched them as Naruto explained his plan, none of which he or his clone could hear at such a distance. That little brat with the claws is a persistent one, he thought as he observed them silently. Okay gang, said Naruto as he finished explaining his plan and turned back to face his opponents. He then slammed his fist against his opposing hand and activated his clothes' unstable molecules, changing them into his XSE uniform as he had during the bell test. Now, let's go wild. Hey, smirked Zabuza, pretty big talk from such a little man. What are you going? I told you to run. Kakashi shouted at them desperately. This fight was over the moment I got caught, now take off. Your mission isn't to prove how brave you are, it's to save Tazuna. Tazuna looked at the kids in front of him for a moment. All three of them were putting their lives on the line for him, even after he'd gotten them into this mess in the first place. Somehow, he knew that these kids would win no matter what. Sensing his gaze, Naruto and Sasuke looked back at him over their shoulders, wondering what he would say. This all happened because of me, said the bridge builder after a moment, because of my desire to live, but I won't let that stand in your way. Forget about me, do what you have to do to save your sensei. Naruto nodded in compliance and turned back to face his opponent. All right, you ready Sasuke? Ready when you are, Dobi, responded the Uchiha heir. At that moment, Zabuza began laughing maniacally and uncontrollably, which caught their attention. You really haven't learned anything, have you? He finally asked, a mocking tone in his voice. Still playing your little game, pretending to be ninja. All of a sudden, the Zabuza Bushin flickered into view in front of Sasuke and elbowed him hard in the stomach, causing him to double over in pain. It then slammed the back of its forearm into the center of Sasuke's back, sending him crashing face first into the ground. Hey, you're a joke, it scoffed, kicking the Uchiha heir in the ribs as it took hold of its sword to finish him off. Hold it right there, Naruto yelled, forming a hand seal with his clawed hands. Kage Bushin no Jutsu. Instantaneously, 15 shadow clones appeared and tackled the Zabuza Bushin, forcing it to focus on him instead of Sasuke. Once Sasuke was safe, Naruto and his clones dogpiled the Mizu Bushin, attempting to bury it under a mass of bodies. But this clone was no pushover. With an angry roar and a swing of its massive sword, it hurled the clones and Naruto through the air with incredible force, causing all of the Kage Bushin to dispel. Naruto managed to right himself mid-air and produced a series of folded blades from his backpack. Yo Tem, heads up, he shouted, landing in a crouch and tossing the blades at Sasuke, who caught them one-handed. Sasuke grinned at Naruto in approval and unfolded the blades in the blink of an eye, causing them to form a massive Fuma shuriken. He brought the shuriken's blades to eye level and glared over them at the Nuke Nin. A Kei's shuriken, Fusha no Cage, Demon Wind Shuriken, Windmill of Shadows. He hissed ominously. He vanished for a second, then flickered into view high above his team and launched the shuriken at the Bushin with all his might. However, just before it struck the clone, it veered around it and shot straight for the real Zabuza. "Hey, so you bypass the Bushin and aim for my real body," smirked Zabuza. "Smart, but not smart enough." With his free hand, he reached out, plucked the whirling metallic fan out of the air, spinning it mockingly around his index and middle fingers. Sadly, his moment of triumph didn't last long, as he noticed a second shuriken closing in on him with surprising speed. Clever, using the Cage Shuriken no Jutsu, Shadow Shuriken Jutsu, to deceive me. Just as the spinning projectile neared him, Zabuza jumped in place, allowing the shuriken to pass harmlessly beneath him. "Ha, you brats will never get the best of me, especially with a shurike what?" Much to the surprise of both Zabuza and Kakashi, the shuriken disappeared in a puff of smoke a few yards away from him, revealing Naruto in its place, still flying backwards with all 10 of his claws leveled at Nuke Nin. "Take this," proclaimed the young X-Man, Gatling Claw. With that idiom as his opponent's only warning, Naruto loosed a huge barrage of plasma claws at Zabuza, one after another in rapid succession until there were roughly 40 of them flying his way. Just as the glowing blades were almost upon him, Zabuza yanked his arm free of the water prison that held Kakashi and leapt aside to avoid them, his Bushin dispelling as he did so. 2 of the claws found their mark, however. One carved a long, jagged groove along the metal of his Hitai, the other sliced a deep cut underneath his right eye that would most likely scar. "I'll destroy you," the Nuke Nin roared as he charged Naruto, the shuriken he had caught moments ago spinning like a miniature helicopter in his left hand. Only moments away from killing the blonde, Zabuza found his weapon stopped short by a very wet and very angry Kakashi. His sensei's intervention bought Naruto enough time to teleport back to shore in a burst of inky black smoke. "Bamf! All right," Naruto shouted excitedly as he reappeared next to Sasuke. "I think we just reinvented my dad's fastball special, Konoha style." "Not bad, Dobi," replied Sasuke with a smirk, "not bad at all." "Nicely done, you two," said Kakashi as he wrenched the shuriken free from Zabuza's grasp and tossed it away. "That was an excellent plan." Cursing himself for being so careless as to set Kakashi free, Zabuza leapt back a ways and began to weave an intricate and complex series of hand seal. Kakashi did the same, his hands moving at the same blinding speed, yet never failing to perform the correct seal as his opponent continued formulating his jutsu. After 50-some hand seals, both Junin finished on the bird seal, and immediately, the water around them began to foam and churn violently. On the shore, Team 7 and Tazuna looked on in awe as a large dragon made of water appeared behind both combatants. Sweden. Suiryuden no Jutsu, Water Style, Water Dragon Bullet Jutsu. They both shouted, their creations rushing at one another viciously. In an incredible explosion of water, both dragons collided with each other and dispersed, showering the surrounding area in a refreshing drizzle. "Wow, so many hand seals, and he mirrored them all perfectly," mused Naruto in amazement. "So this is the power of the Sharingan." Growing even more enraged at the ease at which Kakashi was able to mimic his jutsu, Zabuza rushed the copy nin and brought his sword down on him, only to have it blocked by his opponent's kunai. Both of them glared at one another for a moment, each straining behind their blades to gain the upper hand. Then they pushed off their opponent's blade and backed off a distance, circling each other like 2 lions. It was then that Zabuza saw it. When he stopped, Kakashi also stopped. When he attempted to use his Kirigakure no Jutsu, so did Kakashi. "My movements," he realized as he slowly formed another seal, watching Kakashi do the same. It's as if he knows what I'm going to do next, Kakashi said, finishing his opponent's secret thoughts. What? Thought Zabuza in surprise. Was he reading his mind as well? Perplexed, the Nuke Nin formed another seal. Again, Kakashi did the same thing, at the same time. He looks at me with that eye. It makes you furious, doesn't it? Mocked the silver-haired Junin. Hey, all you're going is copying me like a monkey. You can't beat me with cheap tricks. Growled both Junin in unison. I'll crush you. Unable to think clearly through his anger, Zabuza began going through a series of seals for one of his more potent water jutsu. Halfway through the formula, he looked up at Kakashi to see him doing the same, only there was something different this time. Standing directly behind the copy nin was, that's me, he exclaimed mentally as he saw what appeared to be himself standing behind Kakashi. But how is it a genjutsu? As he stood there, unmoving and dumbfounded, Kakashi continued performing the seals for the jutsu Zabuza had begun, the tome of his Sharingan eye spinning wildly. The effect was nigh hypnotic, he couldn't break the copy nin's gaze. Sweden. Daibakufu no Jutsu, Water Style, Great Waterfall Jutsu. Kakashi shouted, completing the jutsu. In the air before him, a swirling vortex formed, about the size of a small elephant. Without warning, it shot out with incredible speed, bearing down on a very surprised Zabuza. What? Impossible, protested the Nuke Nin, seconds before he was struck by the wall of water. It carried him for half a mile before slamming him into a sturdy tree. The effects of the jutsu had not only sent Zabuza reeling, but also submerged the surrounding area around the 2 in 5 feet of water. As the water level began to recede a moment later, Zabuza attempted to stand, coughing as he did so. Adding to his already full day of surprises, 5 kunai stuck him in the chest, knocking him back against the tree. It was then that he noticed that Kakashi had teleported to a branch above him, another kunai at the ready. How? Coughed Zabuza. Can you see into the future? Yes, replied Kakashi coolly. You're going to die. Suddenly, before Kakashi could say another word, a pair of Senbon shot out of trees and buried themselves into the back of Zabuza's neck. Amazed and caught off guard, Kakashi and Team 7 turned to where the needles had originated from. They were greeted by the sight of what appeared to be a young ninja standing on a nearby tree branch, garbed in a blue and green gi and sea green pants, his face hidden behind a mask that bore the same symbol as Zabuza's Hitai-ite. You were right, he said behind his mask. He did die. Intrigued, Kakashi leapt down from his perch and placed his fingers on the side of Zabuza's neck. There was no pulse whatsoever. He really is dead. Thank you very much, said the ninja with a deep bow. I have been trailing Zabuza for weeks, waiting for an opportune moment to strike and kill him. That mask, said Naruto thoughtfully, willing his costume back to its civilian form. If memory serves, that makes you a hunter nin from Kurigakure no Sato, right? Your memory serves you well, replied the hunter nin gently, a hint of a smile in his voice. Thought Kakashi in curiosity. From his height and voice, he's about the same age as Naruto and the others. How is it that a 13-year-old was able to become a member of the Kurigakure no Sato assassination corps? He's no ordinary kid. As everyone continued to stare at the hunter nin silently, Sasuke gave the newcomer a sidelong glare. Something about this ninja wasn't quite right. Ignoring Sasuke's gaze altogether, the masked ninja silently vanished in an icy cold whirlwind of leaves and reappeared next to Zabuza's body. With a show of surprising strength for his small stature, he hefted the Nuke Nin's unmoving frame over his shoulder and turned to leave. Thank you again for your assistance, he said. I must leave now to properly dispose of this corpse. Excuse me. And with that, the mysterious ninja and Zabuza's body disappeared from sight. Phew, Kakashi sighed, moving his Hitai back to its original spot over his eye. I'm glad that's over. Now that was interesting, said Tazuna as the fog began to clear. Never expected that to happen. I don't think anyone did, replied Sakura. Anyhow, good job you three, Kakashi beamed at his students. You did an exceptional job in both engaging the enemy and protecting Tazuna. That was an impressive display of teamwork. Now that our unexpected guest is no longer with us, we should be on our way. With that, the copy nin yawned and promptly collapsed on the forest floor. Kakashi-sensei, exclaimed the kids as they rushed to their teacher's side. Give me some room, Sakura told the boys as she looked over her sensei's vitals. As a kunoichi, she had not yet learned any medical ninjutsu, but she still knew a thing or two when it came to medicine in general. A few seconds later, she breathed a sigh of relief and turned back to the others. He's all right, just suffering from chakra exhaustion and physical exhaustion as well. All he needs is some rest and he'll be back on his feet in a few days. Okay, we'd better get Tazuna home, Sasuke reasoned as he stood. Naruto, can you and some of your clones help carry Kakashi while Sakura and I guard Tazuna? Hey, I can do you one better, Tem, replied Naruto, performing another Kage Bushin no Jutsu. Two clones appeared in a puff of smoke and propped the unconscious Junin between them, supporting him with their shoulders. This way all three of us can protect Tazuna without having to worry about who's looking after Kakashi-sensei. Fair enough, agreed the Uchiha heir, turning his attention to their client. All right Tazuna-san, lead the way. Hump, I guess these kids aren't half bad after all, especially the blonde and the moody one, Tazuna thought contently. Okay, let's go. We've only got 5 miles until we reach my daughter's house. With that, the group continued on their way, only this time more observant. A couple of hours later, Kakashi awoke to find himself underneath some blankets in someone's house. Ugh, he groaned. My head feels worse than it does after listening to Guy ramble about youth. That man needs so serious help. Are you all right? Kakashi looked up to see that the voice had come from a fairly attractive woman, who seemed to be in her 20s, with dark hair kneeling beside him. I'm fine, he replied weakly. My name is Kakashi by the way. I am Tsunami, Tazuna's daughter. My father told me about all that happened and I cannot thank you and your students enough for keeping him safe. She bowed to him respectfully as she spoke. We are happy to help, Kakashi said humbly. Could you tell me where my students are now? Look no further Kakashi-sensei, said Naruto off to his left. Beside the young X-man sat Sakura and Sasuke, both of whom were still in one piece, much to his relief. At the foot of the tatami mat he lay on was Tazuna, who was also in good health. It'll take more than some Hydro Man wannabe to take us down, continued the blonde, you can believe that. How are you feeling, Kakashi-sensei? Asked Sakura, her voice brimming with concern. As well as can be expected, the copy nin replied with a sigh. It'll probably take me a few days to recover, but when I'm a little stronger, I have a special training regiment that you three will need to practice. Until then, you should focus on getting to know the layout of the area, the town, and the bridge as well, just to be safe. Gotcha, nodded Sasuke. Naruto and Sakura agreed as well. Until Kakashi was better, familiarizing themselves with their surroundings would help them have more of an edge up on their opponents if the time ever came. As he laid back down and mulled over their recent battle, Kakashi thought about the hunter nin that had seemingly appeared out of nowhere just as he was about to kill Zabuza. It was then that the truth of the matter became clear in his mind. Damn it, he swore mentally. How could I have missed that? Hey, Kakashi-sensei, what's up? Asked Naruto, having noticed the Junin's expression. We had better begin your training as soon as we can, replied Kakashi grimly. Zabuza is still alive. What? Shrieked his students in disbelief. When a hunter nin takes a victim's corpse, they eliminate their remains on the spot, explained the copy nin. Yet, what did our masked friend do with Zabuza's body? He took it with him, answered Naruto, his teacher's reasoning starting to click in his mind. Usually, a hunter nin will dispose of a body on sight, destroying it so thoroughly that there wouldn't be even ashes remaining. Exactly, Kakashi continued. Also, if their commander required proof of their target's demise, they would take the head as it is easier to carry than the entire body. He noticed that his last statement had brought a queasy look to Sakura's face. Another reason that Zabuza is alive is because the boy used Senbon needles to do him in. Normally, these needles aren't used in assassinations since they don't penetrate deeply. However, they are used in acupuncture and shiatsu techniques to relax the body. The spots in Zabuza's neck where he was hit would have put him in a death-like state, one that I couldn't see through and that would render him bedridden for days. So that ninja was trying to save Zabuza, not kill him, Sasuke observed, rubbing at his eyes, which had started to itch again. He reached for his eye drops and swiftly applied a bit of solution to either eye, blinking a couple of times to get it working. I knew there was something funny about that guy. And that means that we'll get to have a rematch with him and Zabuza sometime soon, Sakura interjected. Excellent, grinned Naruto, cracking his knuckles in anticipation. I can't wait. Before Sakura or Kakashi could respond, a young boy entered the room. Upon seeing Tazuna, his face lit up and he ran over to tackle the old man in a loving hug. Grandpa, the child exclaimed happily, you're okay. I was afraid I was never gonna see you again. Tazuna smiled warmly and returned the boy's hug. I'm fine, Inari, he reassured the boy, turning to face Team 7. Everyone, I'd like you to meet my grandson, Inari. Inari, the fellow lying on the mat over there is Kakashi, and those are his teammates, Naruto, Sakura, and Sasuke. They helped protect me, and they're going to stick around to help me finish the bridge and get rid of Getu once and for all. At hearing this, Inari looked Team 7 over with piqued interest. You're here to fight Getu? He asked in a confused manner. Yep, Naruto nodded proudly. All four of us have sworn to protect your grandfather with our lives, and help you guys finish the bridge for your country. I guess you could say we're being kinda heroic. Something that Naruto had said caused the boy to send the group a hurt look, appearing to be on the verge of tears. You're an idiot, he said coldly. Heroes. There's no such thing. Getu's thugs are gonna tear you guys apart. What did you say? Naruto growled, getting to his feet with the intent of clobbering Inari. Luckily for the boy's sake, Sakura quickly put Naruto in a headlock and held him back. Naruto, calm down, she reasoned, but he still kept talking. Listen, the blonde continued, you're looking at someone who's just risked his neck to save your grandfather, and the next Hokage of Konohagakure. This Getu guy doesn't have a prayer, no matter how much muscle he's got to back him up. I don't care who the heck you are. Inari shot back indignantly, you're just gonna end up dead, just like everyone else who crosses Getu. With that, Inari stormed out of the room, fists clenched in frustration at his sides. As he left, he slammed both the sliding doors shut with an impressive-sounding thwack. Inari, Tsunami called after her son, but her words fell on deaf ears. Tazuna sighed audibly and shook his head sadly. I am truly sorry. Please, forgive my grandson's rude behavior, he asked to the group. There are reasons for his outburst though. I guess I should be used to crap like this by now, Naruto grumbled under his breath, shrugging off Sakura's hold. Excuse me for a sec. He stood up and exited the room, hoping to catch up with Inari and try to explain calmly this time that they hadn't come all that way just to die. Though the boy's attitude did press his annoyance vein a bit to the red, he knew that there had to be a reason for it. Naruto's acute sense of smell told him that Inari had run up to the second floor, most likely where his room was. Sure enough, as he reached the top of the stairs he saw a door near the end of the hallway with Inari carved onto it in small characters. As he neared the door, Naruto's ears picked up a faint sound coming from within the boy's room. Gently pressing his ear to the wood, he realized that it was sobbing. "Sniffle, Daddy," came Inari's heartbroken voice from behind the door. The poor kid was bawling his eyes out. Both saddened and embarrassed at once, Naruto backed away from the door and stood there for a moment. True, he'd never lost his adopted father, and he'd never known his biological father, yet, deep down, Naruto knew exactly how Inari felt. A long time ago, he'd lost someone that close to him too, someone he'd called family. Pushing those memories out of his head, he turned and headed back downstairs, deciding that it would be better to talk to Inari later on. He wasn't leaving anytime soon. The morning sun had risen just above the treetops as day broke over the land of waves. In their nests, a multitude of forest birds spread their wings and shook the dew from their feathers before greeting the new day in a melodious chorus of chirps and tweets. On the surface of the nearby lake, a group of frogs joined their winged friends' song with their own tune. Just out of their tongues' reach, a few dragonflies buzzed around lazily in the crisp morning air. To any nature lover, such wondrous serenity was sheer bliss. Sadly, it was to be, albeit short-lived. "Tree climbing," shouted Naruto in disbelief, shattering the stillness of the morning. In a secluded section of the forest near Tezuna's home, Team 7 and their sensei had gathered to begin the special training regiment that Kakashi had told them about. However, his idea of training didn't really seem to sit well with the three genin. "That's right," nodded Kakashi, who was supported by a pair of crutches that Tsunami had lent him. This way, he could at least be mobile and train his squad while he recovered. Despite this, it was still a pain to move around. How would that qualify as training? Questioned Sakura inquisitively. "What a waste of time," glowered Sasuke. "Just hear me out, you three," reasoned the silver-haired Junin earnestly. "This won't be like ordinary tree climbing. You won't be allowed to use your hands at all." Now he had their attention. "Okay, but how?" asked Sakura, her interest piqued by the copy nin's words. "Hey, watch and learn," returned his sensei. Kakashi then shut his eyes and formed a dual-handed ram seal. Immediately, a slightly visible halo of blue chakra could be seen encompassing his feet from the ankle down. Following a moment of silence, he then proceeded to walk straight up the tree with the same ease he would stroll along the ground. He finished his performance by standing upside down on a tree branch. And that's it in a nutshell. "Okay, now that's cool," said Naruto in amazement. "It's like watching Spidey climb walls back in New York. This is gonna be awesome. Focus all of the energy of your chakra into the soles of your feet and use that power to climb up the trunk," Kakashi explained as he looked down at his students from his precarious perch. "This is the kind of thing you can accomplish once you have mastery over your own chakra." "But, Kakashi-sensei, how will climbing trees help us get stronger?" asked Sakura. "I was just getting to that," commented the Junin in question. "The point of this exercise is to gain greater mastery over your own chakra. To use no more than is necessary, yet maximize its effectiveness in where and how it is applied. The subtle control is the most critical aspect of every jutsu and technique you'll ever apply. It's also the most difficult skill for even a superior shinobi to master. The type of tree climbing you'll be doing requires the most fine and delicate application of chakra imaginable, especially since the bottom of the foot is the most difficult spot to manipulate one's energies. Basically, once you master control, no jutsu should be beyond you, in theory." Upon hearing that last statement, Naruto's eyes lit up in excitement. If what Kakashi was saying was true, Then he could be able to master any of his biological father's techniques he'd read about in his family's library. He'd had his heart set on learning Minato's signature move, Hiroshin no Jutsu, Flying Thunder God Jutsu, for quite a while, and this training could bring him that much closer to it. The secondary objective of this exercise, Kakashi continued, is to build up enough stamina necessary to complete your task once the chakra has been focused. If you think that this looks hard, it's even more difficult to maintain your chakra while using ninjutsu. As you may have noticed previously, circumstances are constantly changing, and a true shinobi must be able to manipulate and maintain chakra on the fly, if he hopes to prevail. Time isn't a luxury you'll always have. So, while you're climbing trees, you'll be learning skills that may save your lives someday. But, enough talking, the only way to learn is by doing. On that note, a pair of kunai flew from his hands and impaled themselves into the ground in front of Sasuke and Sakura. Use those kunai to score a mark at the highest point you climb to. Naruto can use his claws to do the same. Your goal is to make a mark on a higher spot each try until you reach the top. Choose your trees and begin when you are ready. Nodding in acknowledgement, Naruto followed his team's lead and formed the same seal that Kakashi had a moment ago, shutting his eyes in concentration. A second later, a halo of blue chakra appeared around his feet, causing the surrounding grass to bend from the force of the release as though brushed by a gentle breeze. Unsheathing his plasma claws, he took a running start at the tree and attempted to ascend. He managed to plant both his feet against the bark before falling flat on his back. A second later, he heard an imposing crunch. Off to his left and turned to see Sasuke rebound off his tree, a deep impression of his foot remaining in the bark about a foot or two from the ground. This is harder than it looks, thought Naruto as he got to his feet and looked up at his own tree. Apply too little force and I won't adhere at all. Apply too much and I'll get the same result as Sasuke. I've got to stay focused if I want to get this down. Hey, this is easier than I thought, giggled Sakura from a branch halfway up her tree. She was sitting there, swinging her legs back and forth lazily with an almost impish smile on her face. Down below, Sasuke smirked slightly. Well, now we know which of you three has the best chakra control, said Kakashi, who was still hanging upside down. Whoa, Sakura's good, thought Naruto as he watched her leap nimbly to the ground. He was just about to attempt another ascent when he noticed something peculiar. As Sakura landed, a burst of gleaming, golden orbs, barely visible to the eye, discharged from the soles of her feet in a small arc and then vanished. For a second, Naruto stood there in unblinking disbelief. What was that? How did she? Sakura simply stood there and smiled at the group, who still regarded her with amazement. Though only Naruto had seen the energy orbs, both Kakashi and Sasuke were quite impressed by her chakra control to say the least. Well, began Kakashi, comprehending the use of one's own chakra and manipulating it successfully is quite an achievement. Of the three of you, so far I'd say that Sakura is the closest to overtaking Sandaime-sama. But, Naruto and Sasuke, you two aren't that far off. Let's train for a few more hours then break for lunch, how's that sound? Fine by me, Naruto grinned as he got to his feet and readied himself for another attempt. Out of the corner of his eye, he took one last glance at Sakura before breaking into a fast run towards his tree. I'll talk to her about it when we get a break. She probably has no clue about it anyhow. Until then, I'll focus on giving Sasuke a run for his money. And so he did. 3 hours later, all three members of Team 7 were slumped at the base of their respective trees in exhaustion. Sakura had gained the most ground out of them, making it to the apex of her tree each time she ascended. Sasuke and Naruto were still lagging behind though, having both made it to about a third of the way up the tree. Needless to say, all of them were more than elated when Kakashi called for their lunch break. Just as they headed back to Tazuna's home, Naruto called Sakura back. "Hey, Sakura," he said, keeping his voice low to ensure Kakashi and Sasuke couldn't hear him. "Could you help me get the hang of this?" "Ugh, you're hopeless," Sakura exclaimed. "Okay. It takes a lot of mental energy to generate and manipulate chakra, so getting stressed or distracted is out of the question. You need to take it easy, relax, and focus on the tree until you can feel exactly how little or how much chakra you'll need to center in the soles of your feet. Here, let me show you." She took a step towards a nearby tree and shut her eyes in concentration. As she did so, a halo of energy appeared around her feet as before, but it was different than other chakra signatures. The energy was golden and, after a moment, it began to fluctuate and expel the same glistening orb-like masses Naruto had seen before. Before his very eyes, the orbs began to flash and blink as if they were fireflies on a summer's eve. A second later, Sakura sensed his gaze and broke her concentration. "What?" she asked in an irritated tone. "Sakura, look at your feet," Naruto said. She looked to where he was pointing and gasped upon seeing what surrounded her feet. The presence of the energy startled her so much that, as she stumbled backwards, she tripped over one of the tree's roots and fell flat on her butt. Normally, she would have been embarrassed out of her mind by something like that, but the fact that her feet were glowing like they were radioactive had taken priority at the moment. "What's happening?" she panicked, attempting to brush off the glowing substance that encompassed her feet. "What is that?" "Whoa, calm down Sakura," Naruto said reassuringly. "Just take a deep breath and calm down." Still a bit frightened by what was going on, Sakura did as she was told and tried to steady her breathing. As she did so, she saw that the energy around her feet began to dim and the orbs become less prevalent. It was in that moment that panic was lost and her own curiosity took over. She watched in mute amazement as the energy began to alter in strength and brilliance with her will. "Wow," she breathed in awe before turning to look at Naruto. "What is this stuff?" I think it's beta energy," replied the blonde as he caught one of the orbs in his hands. It glowed brightly for a moment, resembling a miniature star, then fizzled and dissipated as Sakura had willed it to. At the same time, she had calmed down enough that the energy around her feet had vanished. One of Spider-Man's friends, Cardiac, can produce it with just a wave of his hand and create concussive blasts with it. This is what it must look like in its raw, unfocused form. "Okay, but what does this mean?" asked Sakura, growing more confused by the second. Naruto looked up at her with a slight grin on his face. "I think it means that you're a mutant," he said proudly. "You mean, I'm like you?" questioned the puzzled Kunoichi, a look of both confusion and worry on her face. "Sort of," reasoned the young X-man. "Mutants are people who are born with a genetic mutation called an X gene, which is simply an extra strand in our DNA. This one strand causes our bodies to develop abilities that regular humans can't. Now most of the time, mutants develop these abilities during puberty. But there are others, myself included, who display them from birth. You're probably the same way too. Your excellent chakra control probably just masked your abilities so that you didn't think they were anything besides that. So, this is a good thing, right?" Sakura asked, a hint of concern in her voice. "I mean, I'm not in any danger, am I?" "Of course not," Naruto said as he knelt down and his hand on her shoulder reassuringly. "Look, it's okay to feel a little weirded out by this. I can't remember a mutant I've met who wasn't freaked out by the fact that they were a mutant. It's not the end of the world. For you, this is as natural as, well, liking Sasuke Tem for example, or hating Ino-chan for that matter. It's just who you are, nothing more and nothing less. So, I'm still," began Sakura, searching for the right words to say, normal. "As normal as the day I met you," grinned the blonde warmly. It's just, now you know that you're a mutant. Other than that, nothing's changed at all. Look, let's head back to Tezuna's and get some lunch before Kakashi-sensei and the others get worried. I'll tell you more along the way if you have any more questions. All right, replied the pink-haired Kunoichi, standing to join her friend on his walk back to Tezuna's home. Though she was still confused, Sakura couldn't help but feel a little excited. She was probably the first mutant Kunoichi to ever come from her village. She also wondered what all she could do with this beta energy stuff she could create. If what he'd ate about that cardiac guy was true, she could do the same thing if she practiced at it. The possibilities were endless. As she fell in step next to Naruto, she began to ask him more about what cardiac could do, and what effects that beta energy had. This is great, thought Naruto as he explained what he could to Sakura. We're one step closer to Xavier Oye-sama's dream. Zabuza had better watch out next time we meet up, 'cause we've got a few new tricks up our sleeve this time. 3 days later, mid-afternoon, following yet another grueling training session, Team 7 minus Kakashi found themselves strolling through the nearby city with Tezuna on escort duty. Seeing as Kakashi had said they'd finished for the day, they thought they'd take in the sights. Which worked out well, seeing as Tezuna had been sent to pick up some items for Tsunami. As they meandered through the crowded marketplace, the genin looked on in sad amazement as they saw people and children sitting at the corners of the surrounding buildings in search of a handout. More than once they heard someone yell, "Stop, thief!" and saw a man run by with either a purse or billfold in his clutches. What is it with this town? Wondered Naruto aloud. No sooner had he said this, than he felt a tug on his arm and looked down to see a boy about Inari's age standing there with his hands out in a pleading manner. Feeling a sense of déjà vu, Naruto gave the child a handful of saltwater taffy he'd brought along and patted him on the head. "This is the way it's been since Gato moved in," commented Tezuna as they watched the boy leave, a content smile on his face. "We've been reduced to a city of fools and slackers. That's why the bridge is so important. It will be an emblem of courage. Maybe the people who've taken the path of least resistance will be willing to walk the road of courage and dignity again. If we can only complete it, I truly believe that our city, and our people, can be what they were once again." "Again, this Gato guy gets his way," brooded Naruto as the group continued on their way. "Whether it's here, Japan, Los Angeles, New York, or Latveria, it makes no difference. There's always some kingpin running roughshod over the little people, just to make a quick buck." Just as they neared a grocery store, Naruto spotted something out of the corner of his eye that made him do a double take. What he saw was a tall man sitting at a wicker table at an outdoor cafe, a silver suitcase handcuffed to the arm of his chair. He wore a dark brown, leather trench coat, slouch hat which completely hid his face, black fingerless gloves, and black Marines issue combat boots. Even though he couldn't see his face, Naruto knew him by his scent and grinned at the memory of the last time he'd seen the man. "Now, what could you be doing here?" At that moment, the rest of the group had reached the grocery store Tezuna had mentioned. "Hey Dobi," called Sasuke in annoyance, "what's up? Aren't you coming?" "I'll be there in a sec," replied Naruto with distant tone in his voice. "There's just something I want to check on is all." "HMPH," shrugged the Uchiha as Naruto walked over to the cafe. "They probably have a ramen special there or something." Once he heard Sasuke close the door to the store, Naruto strode casually towards the man until he was standing next to the chair in front of the stranger. Noticing his presence, the man looked up to reveal a handsome, chiseled face, with a chin bristled with stubble and eyes as cold as those of Zabuza. "Well," said the man after a moment, "look who's here." "Good to see you too," joked Naruto. He calmly sat down across from the man and stared at him intently. The figure before him returned his gaze with one that sent a chill through his spine, even though he didn't show it whatsoever. Naruto had only met this man on 3 separate occasions in his lifetime, and each time they crossed paths, those eyes still unnerved him to no end. "What are you doing here, Kit?" the man asked curtly after a moment, setting aside the newspaper he'd been pretending to read earlier. "I could ask you the same thing," answered Naruto, retaining his calm composure. "Last I checked, you don't travel out of the US that much, not unless something big is going on." The man sighed audibly at the truth of his statement and cast a cautious glance over one shoulder. "About a month ago," he began in a low, haunting voice, "one of my informants in LA told me that some sensitive items have been shipped to someone inside the elemental nations. Guns, stolen tech, drugs, contraband, a few rare artifacts, even a couple of top-secret documents recently stolen from Stark Industries. All of it has been shipped to one spot in the 5 nations. The Land of Waves." "Exactly," continued the stranger. "Now, seeing as I couldn't get a hold of enough evidence to prove who's behind it stateside, I decided to take a little vacation of sorts and come here myself to see what was on the up and up. Turns out this Gedo guy is one of his contacts here. I can see why too. With an entire nation under his thumb like this, it's almost as if he's a mini kingpin himself." "Don't remind me," grumbled the young X-man angrily. Just the very mention of the crime boss sent Naruto on edge. "Well, it ain't gonna be that way for long," growled the older man in an ominous tone, "not if I have anything to say about it." Just as Naruto was about to comment on his friend's last statement, he saw his friends leave the grocery store. Sakura looked over to where he was and motioned for him to join them, while Sasuke simply jerked his head in their direction. "I gotta go, but listen." He turned to say something to his friend, only to find that he was nowhere in sight, as if he had vanished into thin air. "He's good," thought Naruto as he walked back towards his friends. "I didn't even hear him get up to leave." "Hey Naruto, who was that guy you were talking to?" asked Sakura quizzically. "Hey," grinned the blonde as they walked back to Tezuna's, taking one last glance over his shoulder. "Just a friend, Sakura-chan. Just an old friend." Later that night, after Naruto and Sasuke had pushed themselves to their limits during an extra training session to try and best the other, Team 7 was seated around the dinner table in Tsunami's kitchen. For a while, the mood was quite pleasant, until Sakura asked about a picture she had seen Inari stare at throughout the entire meal. It was a family photo of Tsunami, Inari, Tezuna and one other person, whose face had been torn away. "It was a picture of Inari's father," answered Tsunami sadly, not once looking up from the dishes she had been washing. "Once upon a time," added Tezuna, "if you will, our entire city called him a hero." No sooner had he said this than Inari got up from the table and left the room sorrowfully, slamming the door as he left. "Father!" Tsunami yelled at Tezuna in obvious frustration. "I've told you time and again never to mention that in front of my son." Forgetting all about the dishes, she quickly dried her hands and went after her son. As his mother, she knew she had to try and comfort him in his sadness. "So, what you're talking about is the reason why Inari acts the way he does?" probed Sakura as gently as she could once Tsunami had left the room. "Yes," replied Tezuna regretfully. "His name was Kaiza, and even though he wasn't Inari's birth father, the two of them were as close and as loving as any biological father and son. He was a fisherman who came here 3 years ago from abroad to seek his fortune and ended up saving Inari from drowning one day, after he tried to rescue a puppy who was in a similar predicament. He was kind to Inari and told him that if something was precious to him to protect it with everything he had. From that day forward, those two were stuck to each other like white on rice. In time he became like one of the family, and a revered member of the community." Tizuna paused for a moment, tears forming in the corners of his eyes as he became lost in his memories of the good old days. Those were truly idyllic times. But that was before Geto came to town. So, what happened? Asked Kakashi. In front of the entire community, Geto had Kaiza put to death simply for speaking out against his policies and standing up for our people. Ever since then, Inari's changed, and not just him, the entire community has changed. As he listened to Tizuna's story, Naruto found himself remembering what Inari had said when he first met him. Heroes. There's no such thing. Unable to sit around doing nothing a moment longer, Naruto got up and headed for the door, almost tripping over his own feet from exhaustion on the way there. Don't even think about training anymore today, reprimanded Kakashi firmly. If try to work your chakra anymore without resting first, you'll probably kill yourself. Hey, you obviously haven't had my dad as a teacher, Naruto shot back, sliding open the kitchen door. One way or another, I'm gonna prove he's wrong. I'll show Inari that there are still heroes in this world. Morning of the 6th day of training. Naruto was taking a break from yet another long night of training. He had caught a few winks of sleep in between his training, so he still had some energy left in him for another ascension. For the past 3 days, he and Sasuke had been making the most of their rivalry to push themselves harder than they ever had before. At this point, they were only a yard or so from reaching the tops of their trees. Kakashi figured that, after tonight, they would reach the top and have enough control over their chakra to attempt even the most complex of jutsu. Right now though, Naruto was sitting at the base of his tree, enjoying the stillness of the morning while engrossed in a game of solitaire. He had brought along a pack of cards that his older brother, i.e. Gambit, had given him when he was 11, and decided to play a quick game before getting back to training. He was just about to finish a suit of hearts when he felt someone watching him and looked up to see what looked to be a fairly attractive girl about his age staring at him. She had long black hair and carried a basket full of herbs in her right hand. "Well, hello," he said warmly, laying down his last card and shuffling his deck back into order. "Now, what's a nice girl like you doing out here all by herself? It can be pretty dangerous out here. I'm sorry to have disturbed you," apologized the girl in a very female voice as she brushed a strand of hair away from her face. "My name is Haku, and I've been here collecting herbs for a sick friend of mine. Although to be honest, I didn't expect to find a ninja out here." When Naruto gave her a kind of puzzled look, she stifled a giggle and pointed at his Hitai. "Oh yeah," remarked the blonde in realization. "I'm a ninja from Konohagakure no Sato. I was just out here training." "Training?" questioned Haku curiously. "What for?" "To get stronger so that I can become the future Hokage of my village," Naruto replied. "But, at this moment, I'm doing this to prove a point to a certain person I know." Haku simply stared at him for a moment, then said, "So, are you doing this for the sake of that person, or for your own satisfaction?" Now, that question caught him by surprise. Seeing as he had given the blonde pause for thought, he decided to continue. "Do you have someone who is precious to you? People who are vital to your existence? Okay. What's she driving at?" wondered Naruto as Haku knelt down to pick up a flower she had spotted a second earlier. It was a white carnation, as pure as the fresh fallen snow. Something about the flower's shade seemed to remind Haku of something, as Naruto noticed her eyes take on a jaded, faraway look. When we have who are truly precious to us in our lives, it is our want to protect them that drives us to become as strong as we possibly can. It forces us to break through the obstacles that stand in our way of getting stronger. Once she had become silent once more, Naruto really thought about she had said. Looking back, there are hundreds of people he could think of who were precious to him. There was his father, his family that he had in the X-Men, Sarutobi Oe-sama, and Iruka-sensei. He also had his teammates and sensei, as well as the friends he'd made at the academy. All of them were important to him, and the idea of anything happening to them that he could stop just made him more determined to become stronger. Yeah, he grinned widely. I know exactly what you're talking about. Haku smiled at him and stood up, looping the carnation into a strand of her hair. You will get very strong indeed then, she said as she began to leave. I know that we will meet again, so you should know, I'm a boy. With that he left a rightly confused Naruto sitting puzzled beneath his tree, and promptly vanished into the forest. An icy cold wind was the only trace that he had been there at all. Later that night, Kakashi was quite pleased by the results of the tree climbing exercise. Managing Sasuke and Naruto's rivalry had been quite the chore, yet it had actually worked out in their favor. As he had predicted, the two of them had pushed themselves until they had made it to the very tops of their trees before the night was out, and he'd cleared them to join him on escort duty the next morning. For the moment, he was tasking himself with a series of one-fingered push-ups while the rest of Tazuna's family had dinner with his team. So, Kakashi, began Tazuna as the Junin reached 200 reps. I've been meaning to ask you something. You know that I lied to you about how dangerous the mission was to get you to come here, so why do you stay? To know what is right and choose to ignore it is the act of a coward, answered Kakashi in a serious tone. Like master, like man. Those are the teachings of some of our previous lords Hokage. This is the shinobi way of life. True shinobi do not merely dance to the tune of whoever pays the piper. Though his words made sense to his team as well as Tazuna, Inari couldn't wrap his mind around them. Why are you all fighting so hard? He cried, tears forming in his eyes. Don't you know it's pointless? Gato is gonna kill you and no amount of training can ever change that. How do you know that, Inari? Naruto asked the boy seriously. Can you see the future? Trust me, kid. I don't plan on losing to a shorty like Gato. Just watching you ticks me off. Inari shot back. You go running your mouth off when you don't know anything. You're always clowning around and having fun. You don't know anything about suffering or loneliness or what my life is like. Now that stuck a nerve. So, you think it's noble to star in a melodrama and treat everyone around you like guests at your pity party? Seethed the ex-man. It takes a real big man to sit around and cry. You big baby. Leaving the boy to think on that, Naruto got up and left the room without even finishing his dinner. Later, after everyone had finished eating, Kakashi found Inari sitting out near the edge of the water from the porch outback. May I join you? He asked the boy. When he gave no objection, the Junin sat down next to him and began to explain his student's actions. Sorry about Naruto's outburst earlier. He wasn't trying to be mean or hateful, he just lacks finesse is all. But, you need to understand him before you write him off like you have. In his own way, he's kind of like you are. Inari looked up at Kakashi in both surprise and interest. How was that loud-mouthed jerk like him? Even though he's not lost his adopted father, like you have, continued Kakashi, he does know how it feels to lose someone precious to him. His aunt, Moira McTaggart. He told me of how he used to spend seemingly endless summers on her island in Scotland, how they were the best of friends and how she was probably the closest thing he had to a real mother. Sadly, that all changed 2 years ago. What happened? Asked Inari. She was killed in an explosion, answered Kakashi somberly, set off by a terrorist named Mystique, simply because she was an ally of the X-Men. Her death shook Naruto to his core, and even though it killed him inside, he never let it stop him. He kept on striving forward so that he could make sure that what happened to her never happens to anyone else he cares about. What he told you in there is probably the same thing he's had to tell himself time and again, when the pain and pressures of life become too much for him to bear. Try and remember that the next time you talk to him. As Kakashi got up and left the boy to his thoughts, he could tell that Inari was seriously thinking about what he'd said. The following morning, Sasuke cast a glance back at the forest as he, Kakashi, Sakura, and Tazuna continued on their way to the bridge. They had left Naruto back at the house, not wanting to wake him since he'd pushed himself the most over the past few days. Even though he didn't want to admit it, Sasuke was starting to warm up to the idea of working with Naruto. He was the kind of person who would push him harder than ever before, and that would help him get stronger for when the time came to face him. However, all of those thoughts vanished once they'd reached the bridge. No sooner had they set foot in the construction site than it became apparent that they were in for a long, bloody day. All around them, Tazuna's fellow workers were lying on the ground either dead or beaten to a bloody pulp. Their equipment was slashed and shredded to ribbons, as if attacked by some giant beast. Crane controls were impaled by kunai, power boxes sparking from their slashed and exposed wiring, and sheets of metal bent clean in half. Ignoring the destruction that surrounded him, Tazuna ran over to one of his fallen workers and helped him up to a sitting position. The man was badly injured, with Senbon needles sticking out of pressure points on his arms and legs, and blood streaming down his chin from where it had pooled in his mouth. "Gichi," Tazuna managed to say, trying to bring the man around. "What happened? What could have done this? Monsters," Gichi managed to blurt out before slipping back into unconsciousness. As they rested him against a nearby wall, a thick mist rolled into the area. No doubt about it, Kakashi glowered as he readied himself. This is his Kurigakure no Jutsu. So, I was right, he is alive and he's returned to finish things. He looked to his right and saw that Sasuke and Sakura had already taken up their defensive positions at Tazuna's side, each with a kunai at the ready. "Get ready everyone," he ordered as he joined them. "This is it." Sakura nodded and began to scan the mist for any sign of movement. "Should I try and use my powers?" she wondered as she glanced at her friends warily, Sasuke in particular. The more she thought about it, the more conflicted she became about using her newfound abilities. "I haven't told them anything yet, but I have to do something. I can't be useless again like last time. No way." While Sakura tried to decide what she should do, Sasuke was dealing with something completely different. His eyes were acting up again, but it was different than the last time when they had started itching. They weren't itchy at all, they were burning. But the thing was, it wasn't painful at all. If anything, it was invigorating, intoxicating even. The sensation began at his eyes, and began to slowly spread throughout his entire body, filling him with a feeling of invincibility that left him shaking visibly. Could this be what power felt like? Well, whatever this was, he liked it. He liked it a lot. "It's been a while, Kakashi," snarled Zabuza's voice from within the mist. "I see you've got those brats tagging along, just like last time. And yet again, the little boy is trembling like a leaf in a hurricane, poor thing." It was then that 6 Zabuzas appeared around the group, crouched low with their hands at their swords, ready to hack them to pieces. As coolly as ever, Kakashi looked over at Sasuke and smiled, nodding slightly at the boy as if to say, "Go ahead, they're all yours." Sasuke grinned at his sensei in satisfaction and promptly vanished into thin air. Suddenly, each of the Mizu Bushin that surrounded Team 7 and Tazuna were assaulted by some unseen force. Over and over, they were hacked and slashed at until they looked as though they'd just been through a giant cheese grater. They fell heavily to the ground, like a pile of useless, broken toys. A second later, Sasuke reappeared in the spot where he'd been before the maelstrom of blades had begun, the clones evaporating into a ring of water as he did so. "I'm trembling with excitement," he smirked. At that moment, Zabuza stepped out of the mist, followed by his hunter nin accomplice. The Nuke Nin's gaze, which radiated murderous intent, was fixed solely on Kakashi, while his masked assistant's own calm stare was latched firmly onto Sasuke. As he stared at the boy, the hunter nin saw something that caused him great concern. When the Uchiha heir narrowed his eyes at him menacingly, they began to glow an unearthly crimson, as if they were the very eyes of a demon made flesh. This boy? Haku wondered in amazement, from behind his mask. What in the world is he?